Hello and welcome back to Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Mark Etheridge. We're here to continue talking about our fall travels. We've both been on the road a little bit this past week, so excited to talk about what we saw and talk about hypothetical baseball that is coming up. Pretty fast now, though. We're into mid-November, so fall is wrapping up pretty much everywhere. So, I don't know about you, Mark, but I'm ready for Thanksgiving to be here because once Thanksgiving passes, I always say that it's like full speed ahead to us doing preview stuff, and then we're right there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm already thinking about preview stuff and what we're going to do as part of our rollout to get into the season. What kind of features, how we want to tweak our preview, all these good stuff. Right? It's fun to get into it because you can almost feel it, even though it's colder weather, and that doesn't really align with baseball, but that's kind of where we start the season. It's mid-February. February 13th is opening day, so that's early. So it will be some frosty foul balls in the ballpark near you.
Yeah, pretty much everywhere. Shout out to the couple of places, Southern California and South Florida, that tend to not be affected by it, but everyone else is. But yes, that very much looking forward to that. It's about the only time I'll put up with being that cold is first couple weeks of the baseball season. So, all right, well, let's dive into it. First, though, quick thank you to Academy Sports and Outdoors for sponsoring this in every episode of Highway to Hoover. Been really happy to have those guys on board with us for the better part of a year now. It's been a fantastic partnership. Looking forward to it continuing. So thank you to them. But Mark, let's jump in. I had 3 stops on my trip. We'll start with my trip. Had 3 SEC stops in addition to a few others thrown in, but I saw South Carolina against College of Charleston. I saw Auburn against Kennesaw State, and I saw Florida against Georgia Southern. 3 pretty compelling matchups, frankly. Good mid-major teams, which is always nice that it's not just a one-way traffic, if you will.
Right.
So that was a good benefit of that. But excited to talk about what I saw on those travels.
Yeah, I bet. And that's the interesting part. When you see an SEC program and then you see some of the mid majors, just how the talent levels in some cases are common, in some cases maybe not. And I do think that that's all part of the sport, right? Because especially in today's world where there's so much volatility and portability with roster movements, because who's a mid-major this year might not be next year, right? Or vice versa. I think for me, you started at South Carolina eager to, they brought in a lot of new players, similar to what Georgia and some others have done. It's a new roster. Last year did not go the way that the home folks wanted it to. From your look, I know it's just one day, but what did you see from South Carolina? Who caught your eye? What do you feel of the overall vibe and talent level heading into the spring?
It's a low bar to clear, but I come away feeling pretty confident that the pitching is going to be better. I mean, that was their big issue last year, was it felt like every weekend was just a total roll of the dice. And, occasionally Jake McCoy would have a big game and Brandon Stone threw a complete game against Ole Miss, but then in a following start would throw like 3 innings, right? And so it was just tough week to week to know what to expect from South Carolina. And actually, I guess I should say it was usually poor performance, so we kind of didn't know what to expect, but there'd be these little pops and flashes.
You didn't like it, right?
Right. So I do feel pretty confident about that. And again, it's a low bar to clear, but I say that because, I saw them against College of Charleston, which is they won 37 games last year. But I think folks who follow college baseball know that's a quality program. And in 9 innings, South Carolina held them to 1 run on 3 hits. And the 1 run was in the 9th inning. And it was, I guess all runs in fall games are kind of garbage time, but that's kind of how it felt, right? It was just, no big deal. And against Charlotte, they held Charlotte to 2 runs in the first 11 innings. Now, Charlotte put up a 4 spot in the 12th. So they had 6 total runs, but it was only 2 runs after 11 innings. So and I saw Charlotte this fall. I wrote their fall report. I like that lineup. So that speaks pretty highly of it. Now, the question is it just depth or is there like high end quality here? Because I do think the depth is certainly better. I'm writing the South Carolina Fall Report as we speak, and I'm just writing about a lot of different guys. And so I do think the depth is a lot better there. But the question for me is going to be, is there high end quality? And there are a couple of options of guys who could bring that. One is the aforementioned Jake McCoy, where, I give him a lot of credit for last year. Like, there were games where he just kind of got beat up and he just wore it. And he went out there every week. He started 14 times. He took the ball every weekend, and his ERA was almost 7. And that's a tough thing to deal with mentally, going out there and just knowing that there's a pretty decent chance that, the score line is not going to be in your favor. And he just battled through it. And then he went out to the Cape and he dominated in the first month of the Cape season. And I'm excited to see what he brings back to the spring. He's not going to be the guy he was in the Cape. His ERA was 1.5 and he struck out 25 and something like 12 1/3 innings. Yeah. Like, he's not going to dominate like that in the SEC, but can he be somewhere between what he was last year and what he was over the summer? And if he is, then he's a very credible weekend guy for them. The other guy worth mentioning is Riley Goodman, who was arguably the most highly regarded recruit in the class that arrived last fall, but he had Tommy John and missed all of last season. He's back now, healthy. He touched 99 when I saw him against Charleston, and apparently he's been dominant all fall. He struggled a little bit with his command against Charleston. He got himself into a jam and then got out of it. And Paul Maneri was pretty clear in postgame that, hey, that's the first time he's really been in a jam all fall. So that's obviously exciting, because that's an arm talent that you just can't you can't really teach 99. And so I think there's a lot of excitement there. And I'd urge people, by the time you listen to this, the fall report will be coming in the pretty quickly. So I just urge folks to read that as opposed to going line by line on the pitching staff. But suffice to say, I liked what I saw there.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And then obviously if Goodman continues to, I guess, evolve into what he could be, and we feel like he will, it's just how long will it take? Will it be this year, next year, whenever? And then with McCoy, I mean, it's there. If those two guys meet, or exceed expectations, they can have that 1-2 punch that keeps them in games, right? And they're able to maybe not have to score, 8 runs to win. Speaking of that, what do you see offensively? Lost some really good players, but they certainly have a lot of volume coming in. What did you see there? Who are going to be the players to watch from a lineup perspective?
Yeah, this side of things I'm less sure about. I'm less sure of what I think on this side, because on the one hand, I like a lot of the transfers they brought in. It's a lot of guys who had really good careers at mid-majors or similar types of programs. It's Ethan Lizama from Western Kentucky. It's Tyler Bach from Wofford. It's Logan Sutter from Purdue. Luke Uhas from Louisiana. All guys that are proven, and that's not the entire list. That's just off the top of my head. Like, it's a lot of really proven guys. And so when I went to go see them, I kind of had in my head that I was going to like the lineup more than what I did last year. But then I got to talking to some folks there at the game, and we were just kind of, just as you do in the press box, just kind of, shooting the bull. And I don't think at the time I was giving enough weight to the fact that South Carolina lost Ethan Petrie, who was one of the best, flatly one of the best power hitters in South Carolina baseball history. Now, disappointing last year with the injuries, and he just didn't produce, maybe a little bit of pressing, and he was the clear centerpiece of the lineup, and a lot of things I think came together to make it to where his 2025 season was not what he would have wanted, but still was a second round pick and obviously had a lot of success. You lose Nathan Hall, who was their catalyst offensively, and you lose Henry Kazmar, who went back to Ohio State. So do all of the guys coming in counterbalance that? Is it a push? Are they better? I really don't know, but I will say it's pretty clear who they're going to be leaning heavily on. I think KJ Scobie is named number 1. Yeah. Third baseman last year. He's moving to shortstop. He played a great shortstop against Charleston. Maybe the range is not, he's not going to be Justin LeBron at shortstop, but can he be Colby Shelton? You know, like I think he can be. And Colby Shelton, as much as we maybe doubted that at one point, turned himself into a fine college shortstop. And so I think that's one guy. Bo Hollins, lefty hitter, first baseman, hit over 300 last year. He's going to be a big part of it. And then after that, it's like, pick your transfers you like the most is really what it comes down to. One position I will say, though, that I do have a little bit of worry about is catcher. In a perfect world, Talmadge LeCroy is catching every day again. He's back. There were concerns about that last year, and then he got injured and only played 17 games. So we never really got to see like the final result of that, if all the worry was justified, right? But behind him, it's, Gavin Brayland, who's dealt with an injury this fall, and he caught a lot last year, but just really wasn't effective offensively. You've got Jake Randolph, who is a transfer from Presbyterian, who hitter for average, not a ton of pop, but experienced. And the best of the group, at least offensively, is Reese Moore from Iowa. But the issue is that he hasn't caught much. And so he's a bat first catcher, and in the SEC, with the kind of athletes you have, you have to have a catcher who can help control the running game. You just do. And I don't know that any of those guys are that guy. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm certainly not a catching expert. That's a difficult position to evaluate, even for people who do that for a living. But I do come away a little bit worried, not just because of the players involved, but the injuries too. I mean, they've had Reese Moore and Gavin Brayland have been out for a large part of this fall, and they say that it's not going to hold them back for the spring, but it's also not ideal that you didn't have a fall ramp up, right? So now the spring kind of becomes your fall, where you're knocking off a whole bunch of rust in January. And is there enough lead time to get you in midseason form by the time the season starts? I guess we'll see. But they're going to have some questions to answer there for sure.
Yeah. So from what I'm hearing from you, from what others have told me, sounds like we feel like South Carolina will be better. We're just not quite sure how much, right? Because they won 5 conference games last year, 6 conference games, something like that.
Yes,
they're going to win more, but the question is, will they win enough to get in that regional mix? And that's to be determined.
Yeah, and that's the reality of where they're at. Like, I think South Carolina fans aren't going to like to hear that's where your team is, but I think it's the reality. Is just that right now, until we find out otherwise, and maybe we will, but until we find out otherwise, they're team 15 probably right now. I mean, and there's always one team that just gets totally racked with injuries, and maybe they don't finish 15th in part because some other team just tumbles down the standings, but we can't predict that, obviously. But so I'm with you. They'll be better. I think that's where I come down. I like this group on balance better, but I have to admit, now that I've given it some more thought and really sat with it to write the fall report, I don't know that I like them as much more as what's the way I want to say that? I don't think I like them by more as much as I thought I might when I saw them, because I just started to think about the guys they've lost, and I was kind of maybe underestimating some of those pieces they lost, because it's easy to underestimate when they came off a team that won 6 league games, right?
Sure, right.
But the reality is they did lose some good players, so we'll see. But certainly the South Carolina faithful looking to cling to anything, that could be positive momentum there with that program. So,
and to play devil's advocate, there's so many new players that it's so hard to get a gauge on what they're going to look like, because some of those guys may actually catch fire and be better in the spring than they were in the fall once they get acclimated, once all that kind of jazz. So it's to be determined, but it's certainly not something where in the SEC that they're going to burst to the top of the standings. So a team that was near the top of the standings last year, Auburn, returns a ton of position players, have some young pitchers returning as well. You got to see them at Kennesaw. Eager to hear what you think of the Tigers.
Yeah, a couple things there that come to mind. First is that Auburn is a particularly tough matchup for what Kennesaw is on the mound for Kennesaw. And what I mean by that is Kennesaw, their coaching staff does a really good job finding kind of raw talents. Their coaching staff, Kennesaw, has a scouting background. Ryan Coe, Matthew Passauer, like that stat, they come from scouting. And so they always have like these raw talents, but a lot of times how that gets presented on the mound is like dudes that have good stuff, but kind of spray it around, or, you know, guys that have like a real good fastball, but the off-speed stuff is a little bit, you know, a little bit questionable. And Auburn will just eat your lunch if you're that kind of team, with the position players they have, because they've combined guys who are really, really mature right away, like Chris Rembert, with this group of transfers that are, for the most part, like older guys who have been around and that are really mature hitters, like Todd Clay, right?
Yeah.
Just to name two. But so that was definitely on display. They were taking their walks, they were working counts, they just wore out Kennesaw's pitching. The run totals weren't crazy, but it was just like a lot of base runners, like from the very beginning. There was like almost no clean innings for Kennesaw. So that stood out, because I think that's just going to be what Auburn is offensively. I was intrigued by Eric Guevara at shortstop. Yeah. Speaking of, of shortstop players moving around, another third base to shortstop transition. And the big thing with Guevara, of course, is health, and we can't predict that. He's just struggled so much with injury in his time at Auburn. And every time he's in there, he's a difference maker. But it's just, he's struggled to stay in there for any period of time. He didn't really get challenged at shortstop a lot in this look, so I don't really have like big takes about that necessarily, but it will be something to watch, his transition there. And part of the reason he is transitioning is because the aforementioned Todd Clay is in at third base, UAB transfer, big, strong guy. He hit a home run that went onto a building behind the left field wall against Kennesaw, was just absolutely crushed. And so, I like the lineup. And how could you not, when you start from the starting point that Auburn has with all those young players, and you add to it a group of transfers on top of that, how could you not like that position player group? It's different than what we talked about with South Carolina, where South Carolina is just throwing numbers of transfers at you. Auburn kind of has like these returning all SEC type of players, and it's kind of sprinkling the transfers on top, as opposed to it being the whole thing. So I'm way impressed with that piece of it. And I'm you have given plenty of thought to Auburn, so I'm sure I'm kind of curious what you make of that position player group as well.
Yeah, I think what does shortstop look like? Is it Ryan Farber from Texas State, the transfer? Is Guevara going to end up there, or some combination, right? And then at first base, Eddie Madrigal's been injured. Is Brandon McCrane there? Is it somebody else? I mean, I don't really know what that's going to look like. And then the outfield, I mean, it's crowded, man. I mean, with Bub Terrell, Bristol Carter, Cade Ballou, Rembert could play out there. McCrane could play out there. What do you do with Lucas Steele? Is he the full-time DH, or is he out in the outfield? It's one of those position groups that it's a recurring theme, it seems, that have more starter quality players than they have spots to play them. And that's going to be fascinating to see how that shakes out. Interested to get your thoughts on it.
Well, yeah, I mean, and frankly, like one of the guys that feels like he's kind of elbowing his way into an already crowded situation is Ethan Benjamin, the freshman two-way guy.
Yeah.
He pitched in the first. There were 2 7-inning games. He pitched in the first one, looked great. We can talk about that in a little bit. But then in the second one, comes in, he starts in right field. He moves well out there, chased a ball down the line, and, had to deal with, navigating the wall, the wall past the foul line, try to deal with all that, like hit a home run in that second 7-inning game. And he reminds me, like, he's not this big strapping guy, but he's like, in when you're playing ball growing up, there's always like I feel like every little league team had a guy who's just like not the biggest guy around, but was just like a baller, maybe not the toolsiest guy, but just was a really good ball player. And Ethan Benjamin kind of gives me that vibe. And the stuff is good on the mound. The stuff is good too. So it's not like, I'm not saying he's like an under talented, no hoper. Like the dude is clearly very talented, but he just strikes me as a very good baseball player, more so than what his tools might suggest. So it was really impressed with him as a two-way guy. And maybe the fact that they started him in that second 7-inning game, like you don't want to read too much into it, but given that he pitched in the first half of that, it'd been real easy to just be like, no, let's just leave it for now, and not play him in the field. And they did. So I think that maybe means something, but we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, Auburn's not afraid to play freshmen, as we saw last year. So I would think he's going to get his opportunities. And if he plays well, I know it's crowded, but yeah, he would be somebody to watch. Really fascinated to hear what you thought of them on the mound. It's a group that returns quite a bit from last year, but there's also some holes because they lost some key guys too. What did you see? What do you still need to see?
So what I saw was that they are loaded with what I would call really solid starting pitching options. We talked about Ethan Benjamin. He was 90-93, hammer breaking ball through multiple innings. I don't know if he closed that or regardless. There was a lot of baseball happening. So I forget who threw what and when, but looked really good with his repertoire. Then you've got, we're talking about Griffin Graves, who started the first game, who's a guy that we haven't seen a ton of.
Yeah.
Another not the biggest guy in the world type of pitcher, but he'll get it up to 93, 94 but really knows what he's doing, can really pitch it. You've got Christian Chatterton, we've got Andreas Alvarez, you've got Drew Whalen from Western Kentucky, you've got Jake Marciano from Virginia Tech. All of those guys got more or less treated as starters in this Kennesaw scrimmage, throwing multiple innings, like full repertoires on display, all that kind of stuff. But, it's that eternal question we've beaten to death about Auburn, which is this: if you started the season tomorrow, I'm not sure who of this group is your Friday guy. And there are a lot of good options here that I think would be perfectly reasonable Friday guys. But like, is there a guy here that, we saw it last postseason, right? Where it's like when their Friday guys got matched up with Jacob Morrison and or Cam Flukie, or even Riley Eichhoff, like it was just tough. And that happens in the SEC every weekend, and they navigated it well and have navigated it well the last several years, not having a Casey Mize, Tanner Burns type of, Friday guy.
Right.
You don't have to have one that good, but from this group, is there one of those? And I don't know, but from my look against Kennesaw, like no one leapt off the page like that. They all threw well. They all have good stuff. It's a lot of low mid-90s fastballs. It's a lot of good, good solid repertoires, well-rounded repertoires. And I trust that they're going to get that coaching staff with Butch in particular is going to wring every last drop of what they can get out of them. But, do they have a dude? And maybe they do, and we just haven't seen it yet. But that's still just going to be the question going into the season. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing there is they might be behind the curve on Friday and maybe ahead of it on Sunday.
Yeah. It's almost like you could, if this is the way the pitching staff plays out, and I don't want to sell the two of us as experts here. Like we're just spitballing, but you can see a scenario where it's almost like, you obviously have to pay attention to things like rest and stuff like that, but you could like play matchups with your rotation more so than like having a Friday guy, a Saturday guy, and a Sunday guy. You might be able to move guys around a little bit based on how you think certain guys will play off of lineups. But
and you have enough of them that you could go 3-3-3 if you wanted to, and not have guys stretched out multiple times through the lineup, that sort of thing. Yeah. Was there anybody that really caught your eye, that maybe you weren't expecting? And that could be position or pitcher.
On the mound, I mentioned it earlier, but on the mound was Griffin Graves. And because one is I'd seen him pitch before, but he just didn't make a a big impression because
he had a
had a
great
real.
super regional appearance. I mean, he against Coastal. I mean, he was that was really his coming out party. I mean, he was good.
His stuff he pitched 3 innings. His stuff got better every inning. Was what was
Mhm.
interesting to me. It was like a like a diesel engine, like it took a minute to get it going, and then
Yeah.
but once it really got going, it really got going. And so he was the one who stood out to me because it feels so Auburn if like Griffin Graves is just like a real important piece of it this coming year, because he's a guy who's been in the program, who got a little taste, has had maybe a moment. You mentioned the super regional appearance, like he's had a moment, and now all of a sudden it's like, okay, now he's ready for like this big role. It would just be so Auburn, so often I think we get enamored, and I'm guilty of this as anybody else. You get really enamored with the guy that shows up on campus and just makes that immediate, like a Liam Peterson, right? Like we've been enamored of him for a couple of years because he got on campus. We heard about how good he was going to be. And then by golly, it hasn't been perfect, but by golly, the stuff was there from day one. And he's been in the weekend rotation from day one. And so it sometimes it's easy to overlook guys who are more of those developmental pieces. And Auburn just does. We have so many examples in recent years of the fact that Auburn just does this a little bit differently when it comes to their pitchers. And sometimes they're going to have Tommy Vale as their Friday guy, and they're still going to manage to be a really good team when they do that. Right. And I don't trust every SEC program to do that same kind of thing. So it speaks highly of what they're able to do from a pitching development standpoint. So that's my long-winded answer is Griffin Graves, because it just, I think, typifies a type of development story that Auburn tells as good as, or maybe better than anybody else.
Yeah, it's good stuff. You mentioned Liam Peterson, and I know you saw Florida. Let's transition to your trip to Gainesville. Certainly a program, without a head coach right now, without their top assistant who left for Tennessee. So certainly some things to work through during their fall, but the talent is there. I saw them, 3 weeks ago now, and was really impressed with them on the mound, and also the top of their lineup I think is going to match up with anybody. We'll see what how lengthy it is, but love to get your thoughts on them. What did you see? What really stood out?
Once again, it's a parade of dudes just throwing 97, and look, that's been the case most years for Florida, and it doesn't always amount to a great pitching staff, but man, it's a good starting place.
Yeah.
If you're starting from there, you've got an edge.
Right.
And so there's that. It's that again, and so that really stands out. I didn't get to see Brennan Lawson. Apparently, he has a minor something. Doesn't seem to be a big concern, but he did not play. Carson Bowen, their TCU transfer catcher.
Yeah, he's just catching.
Yeah, just catching. Caught a couple innings. Didn't hit. So a little nicked up there with some of their top guys, but that just gives you a chance to see some other guys. Offensively, the guy who stood out for me is Cade Kurland, and maybe it was just a small sample thing, but the quality of his at bats was really good in this exhibition, and that's where things could get a little squirrely on him in the past. Is that obviously he's had a great career already, but he'll swing and miss some, and he'll swing at some pitches that he shouldn't, and he can get got with really good off speed stuff. But I saw him in just this one day against Georgia Southern. A team that has talent on the mound. This is not nobody's. With some really good takes, just letting changeups drop off the table, not swinging at the slider away. He was just, they were trying to slider him to death, and he just wasn't having it. So I just came away with him as more mature hitter, I think. He was disappointed to have last season go the way it has gone, and when you combine it with the injury he played through in the previous season, it's been a frustrating couple of years for him. So I kind of have this sneaking suspicion that we're going to get a monster year out of Cade Kurland that'll see him off into pro baseball. But I mean, let's face it, like I didn't expect him to still be, even after last year's injury, I didn't expect him to be back. I just thought, well, that's a bummer that he lost his last year in college, but he'll get drafted, he'll move on. Well, that didn't happen the way that he would have wanted. So it gives him another chance to come back. And I think he might be on the precipice of just one of those monster seasons that we see.
Yeah. So positionally, Sam Miller's a guy that's, competing for that shortstop spot. Ethan Sirowich, I mean, he really showed off. He's the Ole Miss transfer, had a couple of hits, including a bomb when I saw him. What did you see out of them? And maybe a guy like maybe it's Landon Stripling, maybe it's Hayden Yost, some of these other guys who were there on the team last year, but could have an increased role this year. Cade McDonald is another one.
Yeah. Surowick looks the part. It wasn't his best day. I'd have to look at the box score to see what he did exactly, but it just was an average day at best there. But like when he impacts the ball, like he really gets into it. Like that's I mean, I think the hype on him is real based on the look there. You mentioned Miller at shortstop, super steady guy, and they went out of their way. I talked, after the exhibition, we had a chance, the media, to talk to Cade Kurland and Luke McNeely, and one of them, I honestly forget which one, went out of his way. I guess it was probably Kurland because he has a lot of interaction with middle infielders. Went out of his way to talk about Miller as just like how good he's been for the team this fall, and just the way he goes about his business and the way he handles things. And that's no surprise. An Ivy League grad transfer, like those guys are probably pretty well put together. So he's made an impression. Then you mentioned Landon Stripling, and I'm glad you did because I might have forgotten it otherwise. He's apparently had a tremendous fall. Obviously has always physically looked the part. And when he was at Texas Tech, it was like, this is Texas Tech's next big slugger. And it just wasn't quite that. And then last year he gets to Florida, and, the fact that he's a little positionless didn't help him, but then he never quite got going. And so he kind of got passed over when it comes to spots in the lineup, but looks like he's making a name for himself now. And the same questions linger, right? Like, where do you put him defensively? Is he just a DH? I guess we'll see. But it looks, based on what we've seen so far this fall, that he is going to be he's going to be a bat that they want in the lineup day to day.
Yeah. Then on the mound, man, I mean, you alluded to it when you started all the velo. Was there somebody, I mean, outside the usual suspects that really caught your eye?
Josh Reitner is probably the guy that comes to mind. Big time freshman name that missed last season due to injury. He's back up to 98 in my look. And it's just like, that's just like a bonus piece for Florida, where it's like you kind of forget about him because he was injured all last season, but here he is, and it's just total blow it by you stuff. And, we'll see what it amounts to, but it is just kind of like a found money situation for Florida. This wasn't a portal guy. This isn't a transfer. This isn't anything like that. Like, this is just a guy that, they just didn't have last year, and now they do. So he's the one that stood out to me as just like, whoa, holy cow. Like that's such a value add for them. I'm most fascinated though by the competition for the third starter spot. Now, obviously they're working from a position of strength, that the first few spots in the rotation are basically all but locked up. Aiden King and Liam Peterson in some order are going to be 1-2 there. If you made me choose today, I'm choosing between Luke McNeely and Russell Sandifer for that spot. I would say Luke McNeely started against Georgia Southern and was awesome. And apparently he's had just a great fall. It's not just velo, it's the secondary stuff has come along. He looks like a complete pitcher. But there is the thing of Florida loves that Brandon Neely style reliever where, he can come in and get you the last 9 outs, get you the last 12 outs. He can come in the third inning if you get a short start and get you to the back end. That's a little bit of a security blanket in the Florida program, and Luke McNeely could be that guy too. So, I think that's a good problem to have, but it is something they're going to have to figure out what role they want McNeely in. And then Sandifer is a UCF transfer that, just looks like he's one of those classic transfers where you look at what he did at his previous stop and you kind of say, okay, he's a nice piece, but then shows up and you realize like, oh, there's all this untapped potential. I mean, the stuff is really, really good. I think he was up to 96 in my look. But it could be a situation where it's less that Sandifer beat out McNeely or whoever else, and more that they want McNeely in the relief role, and then Sandifer moves in on Sunday.
Right.
But again, like it's like arguing about drapes in your dream home. It's like what I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but we're talking about
champagne problems. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Champagne problems. And so but yeah, so I'm fascinated just to see how they play that, because it does strike me that they have a lot of flexibility there.
Well, I went to Hammond, America, last weekend. Southeastern Louisiana hosted LSU, and they had a tremendous crowd. Despite some the temps weren't cold, but it was this cold wind. I mean, it made the game play funny just because it was so windy and it was swirling a little bit. You hit it in the air and you really didn't know where the ball was going. It was one ball hit straight to left field. Left fielder calls it, and he's following it, and it actually lands for a double in dead center field, and the center fielder's just standing there watching the left fielder. I mean, it was that kind of conditions. So it wasn't great to pitch or hit in, honestly, and certainly it was terrible to field in. So I'm not sure, what I learned other than just watching guys move, watching velo, that sort of stuff, seeing how LSU substituted, seeing how they built the lineup, those sorts of things. But certainly one of the takeaways, I wanted to see how Derek Curiel looked in center, and he certainly looks like he's going to be fine there. But Chris Stanfield in left, he made 2 diving catches, and I talked about the conditions, right? Ran a long way and had to extend to make the catch. I mean, he looked good in the leadoff spot. He was one of the, he had a good day from what I saw. The other guy that really stood out for me was Zach York. And, he's a transfer. He was at Grand Canyon last year, and he's this bigger than life character, right? He's like 6'4", he's probably maybe 6'3".
It's a Sunny D body.
Yeah, it's like 300 pounds ish. And he moves really well around first base. And that was the shocking thing for me, because you see that body and you're not expecting, a nimble footwork at first base. And certainly, if he was a little leaner, he'd probably be even more nimble. But he was a pretty good first baseman over there, which was surprising. And he hit a home run in that wind, which is, which was interesting. Certainly, he had to kind of hit through it to get it out of there. So it looks good at the plate. I mean, I think he's going to be the first baseman, and he's going to hit, 4th or 5th in that lineup. Really liked the top of the lineup, right? With Stanfield, Curiel, Jake Brown has had a tremendous fall with York behind him. I mean, that's top, 4 or 5. Aaron Beatty's had a really good fall. I think he's going to be right in that mix too. Some questions behind that, not really from that how good are they going to be, but who's going to fill out the rest of that lineup? Because like a lot of these teams, there's so many contenders.
Yeah, a couple things there. One is I'm also fascinated by York over at first base. He's a little bit of at least to this point, a walking contradiction, where you see that body and you expect slow-footed power hitter, and what you have instead is a fairly nimble guy whose offensive profile is hit over power. Now, he has power,
right?
But it's a real hit tool. I mean, it is not that dissimilar from Sonny DeShera, honestly. Sonny DeShera had displayed more power in his career, but yeah, I mean, it's a real hit tool. He's a hitter, not just a strong guy who runs into a baseball every once in a while.
Right.
And I'm also, you mentioned Stanfield and left, and I think that's when you want to talk about the things that set the programs that are operating at the highest of high levels, what can set them apart is something like Chris Stanfield, who played center field all of last year with Derek Curiel in left, being willing to be like, all right, I'll go back to left. Because it's not like different personnel. It's the same dudes. Right. All that's different is that it's a year. Derek Curiel's a year more experienced, and that's probably something that Jay Johnson sees as being the difference there. But it would be really easy for Stanfield to be like, you know what, I'm going to transfer and go somewhere where I can play center, or I'm going to sign, whatever, because I'm sure there was enough draft interest he could have signed for peanuts, I'm sure, or for whatever, and gone and played pro baseball. But instead, he said, yeah, I'll play left. and LSU's better for it. So it's just that's one of those small things that I think gets looked over a lot of times. But when you're operating at that kind of level, that's the kind of thing that that happens that ends up making your team better than it would have been otherwise. That doesn't get the headlines and make a lot of news.
Right. Yeah, it's a good point. Some other guys that kind of that I think are going to be in the thick of the LSU lineup all year. Trent Caraway, I think he's going to be the third baseman. Oregon State transfer, showed some good bat to ball, moves pretty well out there. Braden Simpson, another transfer. Where was he? High Point. Yeah. He's probably going to play second baseman, but he's a versatile guy, can play in a lot of different places. Freshman caught my eye, Mason Braun. I think it's going to be hard to keep him out of the lineup. He's going to find a way in. That outfield is going to be tough to crack with Brown, Stanfield, and Curiel. So maybe he's going to see some action at DH and spell those guys if they need it. And I think Daniel Harden is another guy who I wasn't sure what his role would be, but I think he's going to have one as a fourth outfielder or a DH, something like that. Then on the mound, Kason Evans looked like an SEC ace, man. I mean, he's going to transition to the starting rotation. And remember last year, he was in it some, and he also closed, but he was just a key arm in that run. And he looks like he's going to be the Friday guy. I mean, he looked really good. William Schmidt threw more breaking balls than I remembered from last year, and it suited him. I mean, he still got that, still got the fire, but it was he looks improved to me. He looks like somebody who's certainly going to get every opportunity to start. The talent is there. Another guy that really caught my eye is freshman Marcos Paz. Saw him for an inning. I mean, he looks like the next one. I mean, that he's freshman coming off Tommy John, so they'll work him slowly, but certainly by SEC play, he's going to have an important role. Not sure what it's going to be. Let's see who else caught my eye.
While you're looking up for your next guy, I was going to say Schmidt is someone who's interesting to me because it felt like he was right there he and Kason Evans were both like right there early last season, and it just felt like Evans maybe advanced a little bit quicker late last season, and Schmidt, through no fault of his own, just it was a good team. Obviously, they won the national title. It just didn't get as many opportunities late, and so it's a good shout out because like there was a lot of excitement about him early in the year when he was pitching in midweeks, then he kind of graduated off of midweeks, and so he's a name that I hadn't thought a lot about, but you're right to highlight him because if he picks up where he left off, he's going to be right in the middle of it.
Right. The guy I was trying to think of that caught me by surprise, honestly, Grant Fontenot. He's a program guy. I think it's his fourth or fifth year, at LSU. Came in and pitched, late in the first game, and it was real stuff, right? I mean, if he pitches like that, he's going to get a chance to help this team out of the pen. It was, you always love it. We talked about this some with Griffin Graves at Auburn, when a guy puts in his dues and it, is talented and it just suddenly clicks. And it looks like for him, at least in a small sample size, he's somebody who can help them. I think another one to watch, what is Maverick Rizzi's role? No questioning the stuff. He's this 6'8", 6'9" guy, throws, 100 miles an hour or so. What's that going to look like? He's got a good breaking ball. What's his role? Of course, the day I saw him, he struggled to locate a little bit, but you can't question the stuff. And I do think whether he's a back end guy or whether you stretch him out and he becomes the third starter, I don't know, but he's going to have. If LSU gets where they want to go, he's going to play a big role in it. And I felt like he's an important piece for them.
Yeah, he was certainly great in the Cape. I mean, the best single inning I saw pitched on the Cape was a Maverick Rizzi inning. Where it's just the fastball is untouchable and the slider was better,
Yeah.
for lack of a better way of putting it, better than the fastball. So, yeah, it's just embarrassment of riches is the phrase that comes to mind, where, it's more interesting to see. Some teams were asking who are going to be the guys, and with other teams we're asking like who are going to be the guys left out, essentially, because there's not going to be enough innings. And that's, when coaches talk about wanting competition in the fall and competition in the lead up to the season, that's the kind of stuff they're talking about, is having a team like that.
Right. The day I was there, they followed Case and Evans by piggybacking Cooper Moore and Cooper Williams, and they were both really good. Evans was better, but he set such a high standard, and they were really good. I mean, they clean innings, limited base runners, that sort of thing. Both of those guys are going to have roles. It's just a question of, are they midweek starters? Are they weekend bullpen guys? Or are they both? And you figure it out as you go. But they both were impressive.
Well, Mark, unless there's anything you'd like to add on the end there, I think we'll call that an episode.
Yeah, it's action-packed this week. You were able to get out and see a bunch of SEC teams in addition to all the other places that you've been visiting, mid-majors and other conferences. So always good to see people with your eyes. I think it really does help when we get into the spring. We feel more connected, right, to these teams.
That's right. Yeah, it kind of gets you locked in a little bit, which is good because, again, we'll start the preview stuff before you know it here. Programming note for the listeners, and I guess for Mark, because we haven't talked about this, so we're just going to do it on air. Next week's episode, we are going to be joined by Aaron Fitt. We are doing our SEC transfer draft next week. No one loves a podcast game like Aaron Fitt, so we always bring him on to play the draft with us. Maybe we'll also look up the teams we drafted last year and see who quote unquote won. Frankly, I'm hoping that the folks who edit our podcast for us, shout out to Pat and Chris, have our teams somewhere where I can look up who won. If not, then we'll just say I won, just for ease of.
Yeah, Aaron will take that well. Yeah,
I'm sure. Aaron, exactly. Yeah, Aaron will love that. Me just claiming a victory.
Yeah.
So that's next week, and then we've got a special guest. I don't want to announce it yet because the T's and the I's have not been crossed and dotted just yet, but special guest the week after that. The week of Thanksgiving is when we're recorded. That special guest episode will be out after Thanksgiving, but very excited about that and hope that follows through. So a lot of fun stuff coming up on the show. We really, we'll be doing the preview shows here right after New Year's. And so just a few more off-season episodes left, and then we really get into the nitty-gritty of it. And I don't know about you, Mark, but I'm extremely excited for that.
Yeah.
That is going to do it for this edition of Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at D1Baseball.com. Thanks again to Academy Sports and Outdoors for sponsoring this and every episode of Highway to Hoover. Really appreciate those guys there. Thank you once again to Mark, as always, for joining me, and thank you, the listeners, for listening. We'll talk to y'all soon.